Hey everybody, Hunter back again for part 4 of the basics tutorials that we've been working on. And this time around we're going to be working with the frame rails out of the Moebius lonestar kit. And these are stock length right now, and I just want to go through some of the steps on the cleanup of these rails. First off, you're going to find on the inside of the rails, there's actually 11 injector pin marks down the inside, and also the part number for the rail is cast in it right in this area here. And I've already cleaned this rail up here, and it's ready to go. And we're going to go ahead and clean up just a couple of spots that I have left on this rail. I've got everything from the back all the way up to here. So what I'm going to be using is the I forget what they call it, a chisel blade. That's what they call this, chisel blade in just a X-Acto knife holder there. And we're just going to go in and we're going to use the back side of it. We're not going to use the side with the taper on it. We're going to use the back side of that. And all we're going to do is just set it right up against the top of the rail there, and we're just going to slide it down. And you don't have to put a lot of pressure on it, just a light pressure. You don't want to gouge into the plastic and make a big groove. And you just kind of work that around a little bit from top to bottom. And I'm getting rid of the cast-in part number right now. And then we will turn that over, and the same direction with the blade, with the back side of it. We're just going to slide it up toward the top. And we now have the part number out of there. Now we have injector pin mark here, one here, and one here. We're going to use the same technique. We're going to use the back side of this blade. And we're just going to slide the blade from the top to the bottom. And the good thing about the Moebius kits, and even though there's 11 per frame rail on injector pin marks, they are raised. And raised marks are a good thing because they are very simple to get rid of. You don't have to do any filling or anything like that. I wish they'd have put raised ones underneath of the hood, but they didn't. They put recessed ones in there, so you got to do some filling on those. And it takes, you know, just a little bit of time to scrape this off. This is pretty soft plastic. And I like to clean up all the inside of the rail, you know, and just make sure everything looks good and we don't have any of those injector pin marks showing. And we have one more up here in the very front. And we're going to go ahead and knock that one out. And that's basically all there is to the injector pin marks. Now, the next step that I always do to my frame rails and all my truck kits, and you know, pretty much anything that I do that's a something like a C channel. On this rail, I use the heavier side of my sanding stick here, and on this side it's a little bit lighter. And then of course I've got a white sanding stick over here that's finer grit. And you know, you want to keep these sanding sticks when you buy them. These are from Alpha Abrasives, and you want to keep these things straight. And the reason why I say that is because they come in real handy for doing things on the frame. And you can actually lay it in your fingers like that, and just kind of set it right against that frame rail, and you can slide it back and forth all the way down the rail. And you want to sand all this off. That gets the attachment point little nibs that was left on there. You will find a parting line that comes right down through here where the fifth wheel plate mounts. It takes care of that. Flip the rail over, and you can do the same thing on the bottom. And I always, you know, check my ends and everything out here where the attachment points were and get them cleaned up. And the last thing that I do is, after I've gone over it with this grit and this grit, which I've already done on this frame rail and this one also, I'll go over it with the lighter grit and get the heavy sand scratches out of it if I have any. And, you know, just keep that thing kind of like that. And just move it along with the rail. And move your hands up and keep pressure on it. Move your hands up. And just sand it just like that. And then the same thing, same procedure on the top. And just slide it along. just like that. And then you can come down the taper that's on the back of the rail here and sand that and make sure that's all good to go. Now, the next thing that I do that a lot of people overlook is, now that you have this all sanded on the top and the bottom, you have a very sharp edge at the top of the rail and the bottom of the rail on the outside. That is not something that you see on the real truck. These rails are C-channels and they're going to be rolled. So how I simulate that is I'll actually come in with my, whichever sanding stick you want to use. I prefer this gray one here, and I like the grit that's on it. And what I'll do is take my sanding stick, holding it just like that, and I will pretty much lay that at almost a 45-degree angle with the frame rail, or roughly in that neighborhood. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. Basically what you're doing is you're just putting a radius on the edge of the rail. And that only makes, it makes the rail look a lot better and a lot more realistic. And the other thing that it does is it keeps you from having a real sharp edge that collects the paint. And that way you don't have any paint separation, especially if you're using a metallic color on the frame rail. As the paint flows, it'll flow down over this edge on the frame rails, and you'll have a real good paint job. But you want to do that all the way across the whole rail, and there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can do it just like this, using the stick this way, or you can lay the stick flat like we did when we were sanding most of the rail at about a 45-degree angle, and just move it back and forth just like that. And all you're trying to do is, just like I say, just round that over just a little bit, not much. And you don't want to round on the inside edges, either one of them, top or bottom. You don't need to do that. A C-channel is just rounded on the top and the bottom on the outside of the rail. So that's what I do to clean up the Moebius frame rails, and pretty much all truck frame rails that I do. So that's a pretty quick tutorial, but it's something that needs to be done in the Moebius kit. And the one thing I'd like to stress now is, anybody that's following along with these tutorials, remember that I do not build by the way the instructions are in the manual. I would highly recommend that the frame is where you need to start, because there's some things that needs to be together to be able to line up your cab and sleeper and the hood. So when you get the Moebius kit and open up the instructions, this is the first page. The second page, you want to flip to the third page and look at all these part numbers that's on this frame assembly right here. And you want to go ahead and start assembling all of this except for the cab mounts. The cab mounts you do not want to add in, and those cab mounts are 168, 169, 76, and 76. You do not want to add those at this time. But I'm going to be doing some more tutorials along the way as we're putting the cross members in and getting up to this stage here. So we'll touch on that a little bit later in the process. Coming up next, we're going to go ahead and stretch this frame. Keone wants a tri-drive truck, which is 3 sets of wheels on the rear, and they're all driven. So I've got to add an extra rear end in, and I'm going to be adding some material into the frame rails. And on the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how we go about stretching a frame here at Showtime Studios, and going to kind of put some of the myths, I guess you could say, to rest on how you need to stretch a frame. I have models, majority of my models have stretched frames, and they have thousands of miles on them, going to and from shows, in and out of the case, onto the show tables, blah, blah, blah. And I have never once had a problem with one of my frames breaking. So I'm going to show you how we do it here at the shop, and the pieces that we cut, and that'll be in the next tutorial. It will not be a basic, but there is some things in there as far as cutting the plastic and, doing the sanding on it, squaring up your cuts once you've cut all the way through the frame rails, and basically, gluing the pieces in, making the C-channel, and also sanding that down to get it to look just like this frame rail when you're done, because you should be able to do it where there is no visible seams whatsoever. And so we're going to be handling that in the next tutorial. And like I say, that won't really be a basic, but I'm just going to add it in because I think a lot of people wanted to know how we stretch frames here, so I'm going to do the whole thing on camera. So stay tuned for that. Like always, I thank you for watching and supporting Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.